Good morning, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is a Thursday morning, the 16th day of February 2023. And it's a very special morning right here on WFM 99.9. We're going to take you up until 9:45 this morning, not with our special guest. Don't worry, don't worry. This morning's edition of Cop Chat, which comes over every Thursday morning on WFM 99.9 on Activated Mornings. From 8 to 9 o'clock, we are joined by this morning Miss Clare Keizer, who is the CEO of Interactive Media Limited and editor of Searchlight. And we're also joined by Mr. Kenton Chance. He is a journalist and media and communications professional and editor of Eyewitness News. Good morning. And we also have Superintendent of Police, Mr. Cornelius Ross. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
So you promoted me. I'm actually a sergeant of police.
Sergeant. Oh, my apologies. Different S there. My apologies. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Christal. Morning, Sergeant Ross. Morning to the listening public.
All right. So it's a pleasure to have you all in here this morning. And what we're going to touch on is the media and court reporting and why it's important to have the media report on court proceedings. So let's start with the roles and responsibilities. Before we get into it, listeners, if you have any questions, you can let us know. Send us a message or comment on the WhatsApp. It's 784-457-9994. And the lines are also open for interaction. The telephone number to call is 457-9997. So let's start with the roles and responsibilities of the media in court reporting. Not sure if the police want to start first or the media want to start first. Police.
Yes, well, it's very important for us to have that partnership with the police and the media. And we are happy to have members of the media here with us this morning. And it is a pleasure also for me to be here at WFM Studios. We know within recent times we have had some issues as it pertains to the public and the media. And this morning program is really geared towards educating and sensitizing the public as opposed to the role and responsibilities of the media. In anything, you must always give context to what your program is about and what really is the media. You know, any of you can take that. What really is the media?
Mm-hmm. Lady first.
Okay, I'll take the question Christal asked first. In terms of the importance of court reporting, and I'll try to work in what is the media and the role of the media. Kenton can jump in at any time. I guess most people would be aware of the three branches of government, the legislature, the executive, which is like cabinet, legislature, parliament, and so on. And then another one that sometimes we miss is the judicial branch, which is in practice is the functioning of the court, the justice system, and so on. The media, besides the court reporting, is very popular among the public. People love to read the story, and that's understandable. When we look at our analytics online, court stories are usually among most read stories, and not just because court stories are interesting, full of drama. The media plays a very important role in the court because it is important for the public to be able to understand what happens in court and see the justice system work. I can go into a bit more detail about this as the program goes on, because but I don't know if I jump in here, but if the public doesn't understand how the court works, how the court arrives at decisions, they will not they will not be able to, they will not see the important role of, they will not see the justice system functioning effectively in the country. Court reporting also works as a deterrent to crime. When people see other people being punished for breaking the law, they might be less likely to do it. Also, when they see people being acquitted or cases being thrown out, when people are found to be innocent or not sufficient evidence against the persons, they will begin to get more confidence in the justice system. Like, if I am not guilty of a crime, I will not be found guilty before the crime. You notice sometimes when we report court stories, the reporters tend to go into a lot of detail about how the judge or the magistrate arrived at the sentence. Oh, it started at this amount of years and 1/3 came off because of this. All of this is important so that we understand how it works. So when I spoke about the three branches of government, the media plays a very important role in helping the public understand how the judicial branch works, and it helps in terms of ordering the society, helping us, providing the public with information they need in order to be better citizens.
Okay,
Maybe Kenton can
Kenton.
jump in.
Yeah, I'd like to. Well, I agree with everything that Claire said. I just want to add this point that the role of the media is essentially to be a watchdog in the society, and especially as it relates to the holders of power. And in the context of government, where Claire mentioned the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, we pay a lot of attention to Parliament. Every time Parliament is, a lot of journalists pay attention to Parliament. We report on Parliament. We report on Cabinet and what Cabinet is doing. The Prime Minister might have his press conference, or different Cabinet ministers might have press conferences. But about the court, not everybody has the time to go to court and sit and listen to a case. How do we know what is taking place in the court? The court is a custodian of the laws that Parliament passes. So when we as journalists, when the media goes to court and report what is taking place in court, then the people understand what is going on in the court. And it is very important for the functioning of a democratic society. In terms of, like Claire said, in any society, court reporting is very popular. And in today's context where we can actually see the numbers, yeah, it is true that people read a lot of court stories about court and crime because of the drama, and just to know
Entertainment.
Yes, and know how the judicial system treats with certain issues. So it is a very important part excuse me, of the media repertoire of our reportage.
But okay, so let me just say at this point, I have noticed that not all media houses would report on court proceedings. Is that because of the rules and regulations or the time constraint? What is the major inhibiting factor to court reporting?
Producing, I'm sure Kenton would support me on this. Producing original news reporting costs money.
A lot of money.
Okay?
And
time. Well, time is money. Human resource is money. Okay? So to be able to produce regular court reporting, not just when there's a large, a case that is of great public interest, on a regular basis, normally a reporter would have to be assigned to the courts. Now, and there are several courts sitting simultaneously. We have the High Court, the Senior Offences, the Serious Offences Court, and all of the magistrates' courts like the Kingston, Calicut, So media houses have to know how they're going to allocate their resources. And I think maybe 3 media houses in St. Vincent and the Grenadines assign reporters or produce coverage of the courts on a regular basis. And I think a lot of it has to do with the cost, financing, the costs associated with doing so. Many other types of stories, other media organizations can maybe just cover online, look at lives, copy from other people. and that kind of thing. But court reporting, because it's not broadcast and because of space constraints, and as Kenton said, people just don't have the time maybe to sit in court all day to listen to one case. It's usually very difficult for some organizations to come to court.
Not only to sit and listen,
Yes.
then you have to go home
And right.
and write and edit and make sure everything is on point, because you're talking about courts.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of court reporting, and like Clare rightly said, if you're not in court, essentially you miss it. And what you get is a summary. And I've always learned, even before I started to cover court, the thing that you try to capture about court reporting is the drama of it. You know, there's the larger issues behind, but you have to capture the drama. You can have a capsule report of what the court case was about, what the sentence was about. But how did the judge or the magistrate arrive at that sentence? What did he or she consider? And to get these things, you have to actually go and sit in the courtroom and take a lot of copious notes. You don't have recordings that you can go and check. So it is indeed a lot of time and money. Once you talk about time, human resources, you're also talking about money. And like Claire said, some people, they just prefer to copy it from others, or, you know. Also, one of the things that some media houses have a tendency to do is to report that somebody is charged with a crime. But if I report that you're charged with a crime, I have an obligation to say what is the outcome of that proceeding. And in too many instances, people go and report XYZ is charged with a crime. And you go back and you search and you say, well,
where's the follow-up?
Yeah, what happened? Was this person convicted? Were they freed? And none of that happens.
Yeah, I just want to support that. In court reporting, other than the importance of being accurate, it is very important for us to be fair. And so from the time the person is charged until the disposal of that matter in court, once we bring the original story about this person being charged, and so as we have an obligation, a responsibility to follow that case right through to the end.
Yes.
Because many times somebody is charged with an offense, but they are found to be not guilty, or the case is thrown out. As you do a search and you only find the one about them being charged, and you walk away, okay, this person was convicted of this offense, when really and truly that did not happen.
Just to add to what you're also saying there, that whatever news you're reporting should also be true, fair, honest, accurate, non-biased also. So you have to ensure whatever report you're doing, it follow those guidelines as well.
Okay.
And the beauty about court reporting, like reporting on court and parliament, is that you have pretty much, you have this privilege where, well, as we know, in court, anybody can go and say anything. That's what the court is about. And once you go as a journalist and you produce an accurate account, accurate and fair is also very important, account of what takes place in court, then you're pretty much covered. So in a sense, court reporting is a sort of easy type of reporting. And it is also content that people really love. So, I mean, if I were a small news organization, as I am, two of the things I would definitely focus on is St. Vincent, politics and court, because those are the two places where you get a lot of very easy content on a continuous basis.
Okay.
And just to add to, Kenton spoke about the privilege allowed people who speak in court, the defense attorney, prosecution, the witnesses, and so on. And that privilege also extends to court reporters. What that privilege means is that things you may not ordinarily be able to say and write, once you're reporting fairly and accurately what was said in court, you are allowed to do that. Now, somebody may go on the witness stand and say some terrible things about Christal, which had that person said that, standing at a corner with 5-10 people, that person not be able to prove what they're saying is true, Christal successfully be able to bring a slander against that person. But once you're reporting from court and you're reporting accurately and fairly, you can do so. But you would see the importance of, okay, say these things came up about Christal when the prosecution was presenting their side of the argument. So you see why it is important for when the defense is now speaking about Christal and saying, oh, that wasn't true, that wasn't true. It is then important on that day when the defense is presenting their case for us also to bring that report. That speaks to the fairness of the so even if at the end of the trial the person is found not guilty and we have published all these terrible things about the person cannot then come back and say Searchlight or Eyewitness News, because that is what was reported in court, and it is part of the privilege that is afforded us in terms of court reporting. A similar privilege applies in relation to reporting from Parliament, but it is not as absolute as with court. These are just some of the very important things, but court reporting, you still have to make sure that you are fair. And that is why, as Kenton said, we need to see the report right through to the end.
That's a high level of responsibility and accountability as well.
Like, for instance, a few weeks ago, I was in a store, and then the mother of an accused, well, somebody who had pleaded guilty to a particular crime, she came over to me and she said, well, who said my child didn't graduate from school? I said, well, that's what his lawyer told the court. I mean, well, based on what she's saying, the child went all the way up to Form 5 and graduated, and based on what she's saying, it's not true that he wasn't, but that is what was presented to the court. So my story is an accurate story, whether or not it is quote unquote truthful about whether or not the guy had graduated from school. That wasn't the case here. Was it an accurate report of what was said in court? And indeed it was.
Okay. Now you mentioned one of the things that I want to touch on at this point. It's 8:27. I think we can continue with this. Some of the restrictions in terms of the law. So that's where you would come in here. What is the media allowed to do? So Kenton would have mentioned can't record. So what can the media do and what can't they do in court?
As you would have rightfully said that the media is allowed to report from the court things that are factual. And Kenton rightfully said is that what is said in court, whether or not it is true or not, you have a responsibility to report factually what was actually said in court. And there shouldn't really be any restrictions or any replications for that. We also have to make sure that the persons who are reporting do not come for any libel cases, defamatory matters, whether or not the publication could be liable to criminal libel, unlawful publication, or anything like that. Something though is that they must have some legal and ethical compliance whenever you're reporting any from the court. All right, so everyone will stress on the ethical and the legal compliance aspect of your court reporting.
Well, of course, in principle, like for instance, sexual assault cases, those are handled with a particular level of sensitivity because, I mean, a person who, I think any crime that is committed against a person affects them severely, but I think the society is agreed that once a person is a victim of a sexual crime, it affects them in a particular way. And I think, in fact, it is statute. I think someone was telling me that there's actually something in the family court law that prohibits the media from identifying the victim of the alleged victim, and I think of a sex crime. We are also, well, minors, we don't identify minors, or we're trying not to identify minors, and try to report in a manner that doesn't identify the minor, especially if doing so would expose the minor to certain untoward repercussions. But a lot of times, these are just judgment calls. So sometimes, I, as an editor, I would decide, well, in this case, I would not identify the person for this reason or that reason. But another editor might say, well, you know, I don't see any reason to not identify this person. I mean, there have been instances where in court where the media pull over there, we had a discussion, so, well, you know, in this case, should we identify the person or should we not identify the person? So these are some of the ethical considerations that go into court reporting. The court itself has put certain structures in place to protect certain victims of certain types of crime. So, for instance, in a rape case, when the victim is testifying, generally the media cannot go into court, but we can go in for the sentencing. At the sentencing, you generally know who the victim is, you know who the perpetrator is, you know the circumstances, you have all of the facts before you, but then you make a decision. How do I report on this case? If this person is alleged, well, if this person is convicted of sexually assaulting or committing some sex offense against a relative, do I want to identify the person? Is it important to identify the person? And if I make that decision, yes, it is important to identify the person, then I know I have to mask all the information that would identify the victim. So all of these are some of the things, all of the factors that come into place when we determine how to approach particular stories.
Okay.
Yeah, just want to add to that. Yes, a lot of times it's a judgment call made by the editor. Sometimes I ask myself, will the public good that will be served by running this story outweigh the damage to the individual, which is
To the victim.
victim or whomever, which sometimes it's even the perpetrator. You say, well, let me just weigh this particular instance here and see if the public good for the public, is it that the benefit the public will get in terms of the need for this information, in terms of them helping to inform their lives, their communities, and so on, be greater than the damage that might be caused to the individual. And these are decisions editors have to make every day. But in addition to what Kenton says, sometimes like in cases of incest and so, and editors, one editor might decide, I'm going to identify the individual, but I will not speak about the relationship with the victim to sort of mask the victim. But another media house who also cover that story might decide, I am not going to identify the perpetrator, but I'm going to say it was his daughter. So somebody reading both stories will be able to put it together. So but that that happens, unfortunately that happens sometimes, but it's because different editors approach shielding the victim differently.
Okay.
Is it a case where they're trying to sensationalize the story?
But in that case, I mean, what benefit would there be from that level of sensationalism? The minute I said John Brown is convicted of incest, then everybody knows who the victim is. I mean, this is a very small society, and you just put 1 and 2 together. But from the moment I identify the perpetrator and the crime, especially in a case of incest, you don't need anything more.
Yeah. So generally, we as Searchlight, we tend not to identify the perpetrator at all, and then you see the dozens of comments online. Oh, why are you hiding these people? We want to know, blah, blah, these nasty man, we want to know who they are. But we are protecting the victims. It's not really that important to know who the perpetrator is. They've gone around for a few years, but we just want the public to know. We want people who have those tendencies, or who might be thinking, or who might be in the, carrying on this sort of behavior, to know what awaits you should the justice system get hold of you.
Okay. So there was a mention earlier, I think Kenton, you said, but you're allowed to take photographs outside. So that's going to take us to the next stop, but we have to take a break at this time. The photographs that are taken outside of court and the letter that was written to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, we'll talk about protecting the journalists who play such an important role in our society. You're listening to Cop Chat for today, Thursday, the 16th of February, 2023. In studio, we have Miss Clare Keizer, Mr. Kenton Chance, and SOP Cornelius John. Let's take a quick break and come right back.
3, 2, 1. FM is SVG.
For the best in tires and tire-related services, come to Kelly's Tire Shop, located in a blue building just before the old police station in Top Kettles. We supply new and used tires in all sizes. Kelly's Tire Shop offers professional services such as wheel balancing, rotations, batteries, tubes for all size tires, new and used tires in all sizes, new and used rims, and other accessories. With over 15 years experience, come to Kelly's Tire Shop for reliable and professional service. Call your shop today at 457-7306 or WhatsApp us 793. Our opening hours are Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. We are closed on Saturdays. Kelly's Tire Shop, located in the blue building just before the old police station in Top Kettles. Drop in today.
It's not just a new year, it's a you year. It's time to put yourself first and build a strong financial foundation. And that's where we have the experience, expertise, and extensive professional solutions to help put your goals in the spotlight. Whether you want to protect yourself from the unexpected or set a financial plan for the long-awaited, we are here for you. Visit sagicor.com to get started. You deserve it.
Get the kind of value you love that's unmatched at Courts now. We're unmatched in quality and prices. Buy any item and get up to 30% off the second item of same or equal value store-wide. When you shop with Ready Finance, you can get it now with no cash and pay over time. Now that's unmatched value.
Let's get your laundry clean and fresh with the widest range of washing machines and dryers in SVG. At Singer, choose between our West Point and Speed Queen brands with an array of washing machines with payments starting as low as $92 per month. Your laundry room wouldn't be complete without a Whirlpool or Speed Queen electric or gas-operated dryer, saving your energy consumption. Also in stock is our West Point washer-dryer combo for only $136 per month. One machine that does the work of two. No need to change machines. Just toss in your laundry and forget about it. Whether your preference in machines is top loading or front loading, whether you want a 9 kilogram or a larger 15 kilogram washer, whether you're looking for a gas or electric dryer, we've got it all at Singer. Visit us today and get the washing machine and dryer that's perfect for you. Singer, your family company.
Welcome back, and you're listening to 88.2 FM The Sound. We're talking about service excellence in the tourism industry. Let's take a caller.
Good morning. I'm Jackie from this agent at Holiday Villa Hotel for the past 25 years.
25 years. Great. So, Jackie, tell us, what makes an excellent front desk agent?
I love my job. As a service provider, I'm always polite to customers. I'm very helpful and I smile a lot. You know, visitors as well as locals feel very welcome when you treat them with respect and concern for their welfare.
Very true. We all need to look at it that way.
Yes, you see, tourism is everyone's business. You've got to live it, love it, embrace it.
Tourism is for me. Tourism is for you. Tourism is everyone's business. Yeah. Live it, love it, embrace it.
FM is SVG.
Welcome back to the studios of WFM 99.9. Activated Mornings is happening right about now. It is 8:39. That's the time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In studio this morning, we've got Miss Clare Keizer, Mr. Kenton Chance, and Sergeant Ross. And yours truly, Christal, taking care of you this morning. We're talking about media and court reporting. When we stopped before we took the break, we were talking about the importance of media reporting on court proceedings. And we're going to continue the final 20 minutes on what happens outside of the courts. Photographs are taken. Sometimes there are exchanges. And very recently, that led to a letter being written to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. So, Ms. Keizer or Mr. Chance, if you can share briefly what that letter was about.
I'll let Kenton take this one. I generally am not outside the court,
Okay.
but I signed the letter because it affects my court reporters every day. So, Kenton.
Yeah, and I really want to publicly express appreciation to Ms. Keizer for signing that letter. Because I think it shows a lot of commitment to her staff. She's sending people out there and they on the front line, and if something is affecting them, it shows that she's willing to stand up and support them. Also, I want to express my appreciation to media houses who actually reported on it. I think some media houses, they have a tendency to think, but we report on everything except the media, but the media is actually also a beat. So I will start with the principle. The principle about taking photographs in public places, and the way I understand it, outside of a state of emergency, one can almost take a picture of anything or anyone in a public place. The principle is there is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a public place. So one can, anybody, journalist or otherwise, can take a picture or make a recording of anything that you're seeing in a public place. Where you might run into some trouble is what you actually do with the content after you've taken it. So you take a picture, you take a video, you keep it on your phone. What harm have you done? I mean, we live in a democracy. There's some countries I've gone to, you can't take pictures of police officers, you can't take pictures of public building. Thankfully, in our democracy, we don't have any of those limitations. So moving on from that principle, outside of a court, the court says within the precincts of the court, you cannot take photographs, you cannot make recordings, you can't video audio recordings. Outside of the court is a public space. So once somebody is outside of the court, the media or anybody else can take a picture of them. So on January the 25th, we went to court as per usual. There was a particular case involving an 18-year-old who was charged with a firearm, who pleaded guilty and was to be sentenced. So the media took a special interest in that case. As is usually the case, we went upstairs. It was at the serious offences court. So we went to the court, got the information in the court, and then we went outside to wait until the defendant came out to take a picture of him. We were just standing. It was also on Wednesdays also is the traffic court, which is also held at the serious offences court. So normally the courtyard outside the court is pretty crowded on that day. So it was me and Hayden Huggins, who freelances with the Vincentian, and Kimali Duran of Searchlight. We were out there and we were preparing to take pictures. And when we saw Sergeant Ash, who was the officer in charge of process, coming downstairs, we knew that the prisoner was going to be brought downstairs. So we positioned ourselves to take pictures. And immediately as I put my camera up to my eyes to take pictures, this guy was up in my face. He was like literally like 2 feet or less away from me. And he was extremely, extremely aggressive to the point that Sergeant Ash had to shout at him and tell him to stop assaulting the journalist. And when the sergeant spoke to him, he relented, he walked away a little, then he came back and it was the same thing. I had to appeal to a constable who was there to ask this gentleman to refrain from, his behavior. There was a pastor there, I also appealed to the pastor. And, I don't want to say too much more about it because the police are investigating it, and this is something that could possibly end up in court. Mm-hmm. But the point that I want to make, and the Prime Minister wrote a letter to us, and I thank the Prime Minister for his letter, and he made a point that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a democracy. And among the people who have rights and responsibilities, the media. And, we are going there. People might not be happy when we report on something, but we're not doing anything wrong. We're not doing anything wrong legally. We're not doing anything wrong morally. We're not doing anything wrong ethically. So even if you are unhappy with it, it doesn't give you the right to assault somebody or to prevent them from making a legitimate livelihood. Sometimes I've been outside of the court and people say, "Where you gonna look for hard work for?" I mean, any harder work than a media person.
If only they knew.
So we had a meeting with the commissioner of police, and the commissioner, well, he invited us to a meeting, and he expressed support for what we do. He said that St. Vincent and Grenadines is a democracy. There's freedom of press here, and the police also do all that they can to ensure that freedom of the press continues. He told us that an investigation has been launched, and I've given statements. I know Mr. Durant has given a statement, and Mr. has also given a statement as part of that investigation. So maybe charges might be proffered in that matter. But in essence, my message to the public is simply to just leave us alone. You go to court to support your loved ones who's charged with a crime or who's pleaded guilty to a crime. All well and fine. We're not saying, and one of the points is that I said to the gentleman, I said, look, this is a public place. You have a right to be here. I have a right to be here. What you don't have a right to do is to assault me or to prevent me from doing my job. And this is not a one-off thing. I've been covering the court for a few years now, and over the years, we've had several of these incidents. In fact, on one occasion, I was assaulted, and somebody was successfully prosecuted. A young lady was prosecuted for threatening to get somebody to kill journalist Life Compton. So it's not. It is a serious matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is a really serious matter. And we just want to appeal to members of the public. When you come to court to support your loved ones and you see journalists, don't try to stop us from doing our job. We're not doing anything wrong in reporting and taking pictures of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just endorse everything Kenton had said. I just wanted to make 2 points. The person who was convicted of threatening Life Compton, who works with Searchlight, and at that time when that threat was uttered to him, was also working with Searchlight, was not necessarily somebody who was found guilty in court or charged. It was a relative or friend of somebody who was in court. So, you know, just to say to people out there that be very careful. You can be convicted in the court, you can be imprisoned, you can be fined for threatening anybody, including journalists. And I just wanted to make another point. Very often we hear people say, who gave you permission to use my picture? Just a small comment about ownership of photographs. Just in the same way a painting is owned by the person who makes the painting. Once we take photos, you know, as Kenton said, in a public space, the photograph is owned by the owner of the equipment or the photographer. Sometimes the owner of the equipment and the photographer, they are one and the same. Mm-hmm. But just because you are the subject of the photograph doesn't make you the owner of the photo and say, my picture. The picture is not owned by you. It's owned by the person who took the photo or owns the equipment that took the photograph. I just thought that little bit might be useful. A little bit of information might be useful.
Yeah, and another thing, you know, sometimes people come outside of the court and, I mean, they might just come to see.
Mm-hmm.
But we start taking pictures and they start to, you know, curse or whatever. I mean, you might not be the subject of a photograph, but you might be included in there as a consequence of being there. And excuse me, I don't want to say to anybody, don't come to the court, because the court is a public place. The magistrate or the judge or the police, they would decide who to allow in or who not to allow in. And generally, anybody can come to court. You come to court, they would do a check of your person to see if you have any illegal items on you. Once you're dressed appropriately and there's space in the courtroom, you can come into the courtroom. Think of the court as a market square. And as big as the market square is, people are allowed to come there. Once you come there and you conduct yourself properly, the court is not going to pay any attention to you. But not everybody has the time to come to the market square and to listen to what is happening. So we as journalists, we go there and we give you a synopsis. We tell you what we think the important elements of this court hearing is. So going back to the point, even if you come to the court to see what is taking place, you know, you have to be mindful that as a consequence of being in this public place, my photo might be taken, or I might end up in the background in a photograph or something like that. So you have to make a determination. If I don't want to be photographed, then maybe it might not be a good idea. It might be a good idea to not go there.
Okay. I think I'm going to squeeze in a call, so you're going to have to put on your headphones to listen to this one. Hello, good morning. Righty then, we've got 10 more minutes. So, Sergeant Ross, I think now is a good time to perhaps echo what the media is saying as it concerns being able to peacefully take photographs, do their job outside of the court.
Well, under the Constitution, there are media laws, and not just media laws. There's a Freedom of Information Act. So that Freedom of Information Act gives them that privilege, the authority to report on matters, take photos, however it takes to get their story out there. As I said earlier, their story must be fair, accurate,
and without malice.
Yes, non-bias. Let's use the term non-bias. And also under there's the Newspaper Control Act. And we noticed within recent times too, we call it now the new age, where a lot of these, what we call online publications, have come to the fore. We have gotten away a bit from the traditional media, which is basically the newspapers, the television, the radio. And now we are in this age of technology, and it's a lot easier for journalists. Journalists want their story to get out there as quickly as possible, as soon as the information. So as soon as something happens, they want the information to be out there. And what other better way than to use social media to get that information out there right now? And we could see what's happening in terms of social media. Sometimes to be upfront a lot of times without even doing some fact checking, you see sometimes the information goes out there. But we have to always remember that whatever we're reporting must be factual and accurate and non-biased. And we must always fall under the guidelines of the Freedom of Information Act, which falls under the media policy.
We didn't mention time. Is time a factor in reporting?
Of course. Timeliness is really important because one of the definitions of news, it must be new, it must be interesting. If 10 people have published it before you, it's no longer news. I mean, everybody has heard about it before, everybody has read it before, but verification goes to the essence of journalism. Okay, you hear something, you hear it all the time. You might hear somebody say something and you can't just run and publish it just because you want to be first. You must take the time to verify that information and remember that journalism's first obligation is to the truth, and not because two people told you so makes it true. Okay, and there's also sometimes when it comes to reporting death, like somebody who is killed, and this is just my personal preference, sometimes I like to give it a little time, even though I have verified who the victim is. I sometimes think about the relatives of the victim and that maybe this might not be the way that they would want to learn about it. So sometimes in some cases, I tend to say, well, let somebody else run. I wait a little time because I think about the relatives sometimes. But verification is very, very, very important. More important, it's being first is not the only consideration.
Okay.
If I may, before you comment, Sergeant Ross, I say a lot to people that it is good to be first, but it's better to be right. And I mean, I think every media house at some point or the other, we've gotten something wrong, and it's the worst thing ever. I mean, if you're a true journalist, whenever you get something wrong, it just really eats you. And I mean, sometimes you might get the wrong information from very reliable sources, but I mean, once you put it out there, then it's yours. You have to stand by it. You have to take responsibility for it. So it is very important to verify information. A lot of times people talk about investigative journalism. My principle is all journalism is investigative. If you haven't investigated it, you haven't done any journalism. So if somebody says, well, the Prime Minister was on VFM and he said X, it is our responsibility to go and get the recording and see what the Prime Minister actually said, to see the context in which he said it.
And the correct words.
The Prime Minister might have said X, but he might have been quoting Y saying X. So this concept of investigative journalism, it just has to do with verifying information. It doesn't mean that because there's a story where you have to make 10 calls that it becomes investigative. You know, on the issue of reporting death, my position is similar to Claire's. Sometimes, even if I'm outside of a police cordon and I've already gotten the information about who the victim is, I will not necessarily disclose that information in a live broadcast or something like that. Because I also think, well, one, I think it's very important to absolutely verify that when you say somebody has died, that it is indeed the person who you're saying has died, that it is that person who's died. And also, I also think about, I do consider the victims, but maybe a little different from Claire. I don't think it is my responsibility to inform the family. But I try to give it enough time to, you know, where I will make a determination where, you know, yeah, I think by now the family might have known. Like, for instance, there was a recent case where the gentleman Hathaway was killed recently in Otley Hall.
Yeah.
And I'm chatting online with some people, and, you know, like they tell me, I said, well, you know, I actually know that already, but I'm not going to write a story yet. And then when I was satisfied, I said to him, well, look, I'm going to write my story now. But, you know, each media entity has to make its own decision about what its standards are. And, you know, having the principle is important. So at the end of the day, you can say, well, these are the guidelines by which we operate. You might not necessarily agree with it, but this is our standard. But, you know, sometimes we look online and you wonder, well, what really is going on? Is it the dog is wagging the tail, or the tail is wagging the dog? But everybody has to make that determination for him or herself, or for their media entity.
Yeah, just to clarify, no, it's definitely not my responsibility or Searchlight's responsibility to inform the relatives. That's a bit of misinterpretation, Kenton. I mean, I meant the same thing that you said. I give it a little time, because I ask myself, is this how I would like to be informed of the death of a relative? You know, so I give it a little time before we publish.
Yeah. Okay. Sergeant Ross, you were gonna.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to emphasize that there are also penalties for printing news, false news. And here, it says here, penalty for printing etc. newspaper in Contravention Act. Any person who prints, publishes, or causes to be printed or publish any newspaper in contravention of section 3, 6, or 10, or B, sells or distribute any newspaper which he knows or has reason to believe has been printed or published in contravention of any of those sections, is guilty of an offense and liable to a fine of $1,500. So you see, you have a responsibility to ensure that whatever you're printing is also factual.
Yeah, so we are held to an account as well.
Yes.
Just want to jump in here. Earlier on, Sergeant Ross mentioned the Freedom of Information Act, which actually was passed in Parliament probably 20 years ago.
2003 about.
20 years ago, but the act is not operational. It wasn't assented to. So we can say it was passed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but it's not operational. And I just want to use this opportunity to, you know, encourage the powers that be. I think there was something, it was part of a regional project, and that regional project ran into some snags, which last time we checked, I think the Minister of Finance said that was the holdup, and they were redoing to have our own thing. But it's high time. We need for the Freedom of Information Act in St. Vincent and Grenadines to become operational.
Okay.
Yep, and I support that 100%.
The entire media fraternity should support it too. All right, so it's 9 o'clock. We have to end at this time. So final thoughts, final comments, really quickly.
I just want to say thank you very much, Sergeant Ross, for this opportunity to engage with the public and with the police. It's very, very important for us to have these chats from time to time, because I think sometimes people may not have the information and they may be under certain misconceptions as to what are the roles and what are the responsibilities and what we are allowed to do in society. And it's quite ironic that everybody likes to read court stories, as I said when I started, except when it has to do with somebody close to them, you know? So I will, and as I said, besides that, it is very, very important for our democracy that we continue to fairly and accurately report what happens in our courts. Important for just the governance of the country, and to make sure, as we are a watchdog on all branches of government, including the judiciary.
Okay, Kenton.
Yes, I endorse Claire's comments, and I just want to thank you very much for having me here. And I hope that this was a useful conversation to have had with the public. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ross?
Indeed, it was a pleasure to have both of you guys. We want to continue that relationship with the media. We know how important it is for the media to the police, because we want to get our information out there. So we have to have this partnership with you to get the positive message of the police out there. A lot of times, persons don't see the positiveness of the police. We always hear about the negativity of the police. So we want to continue that relationship. And just to say, there's a protection of freedom of expression, and persons are allowed to express themselves. However, when you express yourself, you must be responsible.
Within the confines of the law.
Exactly, within the
Of
confines
course.
of the law.
And if you go outside, and then you'll be in touch with the
Prosecuted, yes.
RSVGPF. All right. Or that. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. Hopefully, this conversation can trigger other conversations. And there are quite a number of things that were mentioned this morning that can start other conversations within media and responsibility and accountability. Hopefully, in the future, near or far, we can have a follow-up discussion. All right. So thank you. And that was Cop Chat for today. Thank you to all the listeners who joined us as well. We're going to head straight into the ECCB Bank Rates. It's brought to you, compliments the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Brick by brick, piece by piece, building with technology. Help